Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. In today's video, we're going to talk about chef's knives. If you guys do like chef's knives, or if you like knives in general, or machines, you better go ahead and subscribe because that's pretty much all we do here. But on today's episode, we're going to be exploring whether or not I have been making chef's knives wrong. Recently, I've been getting some feedback from some people who are in kind of a different part of the chef's knife world than what I have been going for. My main audience for chef's knives are usually home cooks, people who like nice knives and who like having nice knives in their home kitchens. I do have some knives in professional kitchens, but it's not really what I've been going for. This is a knife that I made for myself last year, and it's fairly common. The handle's a little bit smaller than what I've been normally doing, but it's, other than that, about average. It's an 8-inch edge, which is 200 millimeters. It's 2 inches tall at the heel, which is about 50 millimeters, and it is a little on the thin side at 100 thou at the edge, which is 2.6 millimeters. However, it is a good bit smaller than what the kind of hot or trendy proportions are for a chef's knife right now. And kind of the hot proportions right now for a chef's knife, especially a gyudo, that's kind of the hottest profile right now, which is the Japanese version of a Western chef's knife. So it has a little bit more curve to its edge, a little bit more length on it, kind of a more do-it-all style of knife. And the hot proportions for those gyudos right now is about a 240 millimeter edge, which is about 9 3/8 of an inch. 55 millimeters tall at the heel, which is about 2 3/16, a little bit less than that, and then 4 millimeters thick at the spine. So not quite twice as thick, but about 1.5 inches longer and about 3/16 of an inch wider than this knife right here. So we're gonna do a little bit of testing, both subjective, how I think it feels, and then some more objective testing about how it goes through different items, proteins, vegetables, stuff like that. So let's jump right on in with a little bit of O2 tool steel, which is a rather difficult steel to find here in the United States. I'm very excited to have found a bar of it, and we're gonna turn some of that into this knife right here.
Now, before we do any actual work, let's just relax for a second and talk about today's sponsor, which is Factor. Factor is an awesome solution for those of you, well, there's lots of different situations where Factor would be extremely handy. One, if you live a busy lifestyle, like I do, I think Factor is fantastic. You might just not have time to run to the grocery store and cook good meals. If you find yourself eating out a lot and spending lots of money on food that might not even be super good for you, Factor is another awesome replacement for that. And they are absolutely delicious. Now, there's all different kinds of meals that you can get. There's keto, calorie smart, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, gluten-free, whatever you want. So if you guys are interested in getting nutritious, wholesome meals that you don't have to take the time to cook, all it takes is 2 minutes in the microwave or in the oven if you want. It takes more than 2 minutes in the oven, but you can do it in the oven if you want. So if you guys are interested in going and getting these delicious, never frozen meals shipped straight to your door,
head to factor75.com and use code WillStelter50 for 50% off your first box.
Thank you, Factor, for sponsoring today's episode. With that, let's do some work.
Normally for an integral bolster chef's knife, I want to portion off about 3.5, not usually more than 4 cubic inches of steel. For something this big though, I'm going to portion off about 4.5 cubic inches of steel, which for a 1 by 2.5 bar, which is 1.8 inch cut off of the end of this 1 by 2.5 inch bar of O2. This feller done been austenizing at about 1450 degrees Fahrenheit. Look at how precise that is. Thank you, Even Heat, for making excellent kilns. Anyway, it's been austenized for about 10 minutes. We're going to quench it in some AAA, which is a medium rate quenching oil. Alrighty, the blade is pretty much donezo. I did a Scotch-Brite belt finish on it. It's got a nice convexity to it, which means that it's not flat. It has a bit of a rounded bevel to it, and that just helps with cutting performance. Food separates a little bit easier because the angle at the edge is wider than the angle at the top. And so depending on what you're cutting, that can be quite nice. I've got everything very aggressively rounded out. There is absolutely no hot spots on this knife, but it still looks really good. Next step is to start working on the handle. This is some yellow cedar that was sent to me by my friend Luke Owl Woodworks. He makes amazing cutting boards, and he's actually the one that recommended that I try doing some knives more in this dimension. And so this is a fitting handle material. It's an absolutely beautiful burl, and it is very heavy after stabilization. So it's been professionally stabilized. It's now, like I said, super dense, which is a good thing. I needed something dense on this knife to kind of help balance it out. Right now, the balance point on the knife is right there. And with this amount of wood on the back, I'm hoping that it'll bring that balance point back to, well, right around where you hold it in the pinch grip. That'll make it feel a little bit more lively, and it'll actually make it feel lighter, despite the fact that we're adding more weight onto it. So we're gonna head on over to the bandsaw, rip ourselves off a nice inch-wide slab of this material, and get to fitting. Start off with the spin test. Clearly an important test. I gotta say, the smaller chef's knife definitely wins the old spin test, but as I've been working on this knife and making it and shaping the handle and feeling it, it is really comfortable. I mean, there is a massive size difference between these two handles. The 240 is way, way, way bigger, and it has a far more aggressive peak right here. That's not necessarily a size difference thing. It's just something that I've started adding my knives since I made this one, and it just fills up that space, that that big swell in the palm of your hand really well and gives you a lot of control over the knife. And another thing to note is that the edge on this guy is a decent bit thicker than on this one. I will probably go back and end up thinning out this edge later on in life. But for this test, it should be okay. I really want to feel the weight of the knife and how that interacts with the assortment of different vegetables that we have lined up. I think the first thing that we're going to start off with is a brown russet potato. Something starchy, something that needs a little bit of weight. Not the hardest thing, but not terribly easy to go through if you don't have a little bit of meat behind the blade. So I'm going to start off with the knife that I know. So that cut went very well. This has a rather stout edge geometry to it, and so obviously it didn't stick or anything like that. Let's try the thicker knife. Oh my gosh, definitely easier, but getting a little bit of food stick. That has more to do with my edge geometry than anything else. We'll try a thin slice with this. Oh, there we go. The cut doesn't feel all that different. I would say if anything it's a little bit easier with the big knife. I just think that you've got a lot of weight behind the knife. It doesn't really feel like I have to do a whole lot of work to push through. And I feel like I have to do just a tiny bit more work with the lighter knife. I mean, if I let it fall, kind of lands right there. With the bigger knife, if I let it fall, it goes a little bit farther in. It just feels like the knife is doing a little bit more work, but they're both relatively easy. I think that for the potato, I really liked the feel of the heavier knife. I think that it was nice to have the weight of the knife to be able to go through everything a little bit easier. So with that, let's move on to something a little bit more delicate, like a tomato. Alrighty, we'll do one whole tomato each, mostly dicing it, but I'm gonna do a couple like little slicey type deals on it to see how I like it. Oh my gosh. I liked that a lot. That was good. Please forgive my knife skills, by the way, or the lack thereof. Nice. That's good. A little bit more effort to go through something even like a tomato. That was a nice cut. Really don't notice the difference a whole lot. All right, I'm going to start off by just taking a little bit off, and that'll just make it a little bit easier for us to cut. I'm going to do my first cut with the 8-inch chef. I think I have a feeling that is not super easy. Not the hardest thing in the world, but not terribly easy. Take another. Yeah, that was not even in the same arena. That was 1,000 times easier. A little bit of food stick there, but that's more in relation to the actual geometry of the edge. And let's give it a shot with the 8-inch. You know, kind of a similar level of ease, but I'd say splitting that thing in half, the 240 really shines, being able to do those long cuts like that. Oh, well, that went a little bit easier, a little bit less resistance though. I'd say it for the sweet potato, the 240 definitely wins. Not only did it go through the big, thick, starchy areas way easier than the smaller chef, but I think that having that big, wide grip, most of the control comes from my pinch here, but I think having that big area pushing into my palm just gives me a little bit more oomph behind the knife, whereas this smaller handle, well, it's comfortable, especially for light, fine things. It just doesn't have quite that same, doesn't fill up my grip the same way. And so I think that the 240 definitely took the sweet potato round. All right, for the onion, I'm gonna cut off both of my ends with the 240 at the tip. We'll do our split. That's harder than I thought it was gonna be. Nice and easy. Also nice and easy, but it seems a little bit more challenging to do it with a knife that has less weight behind it. Let's do our kind of more fine cutting.
Nice and easy task for a knife of that size. Let's see how it does for the 240. I think it's easier. Ah, this is so weird. I was so thinking when I started doing this that I was not going to like a knife this big to use. But I really do. What a strange feeling. Is this what feeling wrong? Is this what being wrong feels like?
Yes.
I like this knife more. Isaiah's giving the knife a try.
Some stick, but I mean, it's, yeah, this thing cuts way smoother than any other knife I've used. Seal of approval, Will's been doing it wrong this whole time.
Next up, we have one of my all-time favorite things to cut, which is mushrooms. We'll start off with our 8-incher, the one that I'm used to using. Ugh, effortless. I like that. I might like the other one a little bit more for this task, though. Yeah, I definitely prefer the smaller knife for the mushrooms. Next up, we have some cilantro. I'm very interested to see this one. I'm going to start off with the 240 since it lost the last round. That was also very easy. It's really an edge profile thing. And I think that it's a little bit more comfortable for me with the smaller knife, but the weight of this one is definitely nice, but I don't think that it makes a huge difference cutting through cilantro. So we'll call that one a draw. Next up, we've got this here avocado, and this will just be testing out kind of like the tip dexterity. Just the way that I normally cut an avocado is with the tip of the knife. And so I want to make sure that I'm not going to be going through, but I feel like I've got plenty of control here, even to be able to cut into my hand essentially. Oh, definitely went through the back of it there. I am bleeding. That's a joke. I'm not bleeding. Yeah, I feel like I have maybe a little bit better control doing a task like this with the smaller knife. Just, there's not a whole lot stopping it or anything like that. It's all kind of light. And the last thing that we have is this big old half of a watermelon right here. And as we all know, watermelons are super inconvenient to cut through. Which is why having a big knife is very nice. So we're just going to cut off a 1-inch wide ring. Feeling the width of the grip really helps with controlling that knife in a way that I don't think that littler knife is going to do. Yeah, you know, it's not that it's uncomfortable, but I feel more of the pressure of my hand going along the part of the spine there as opposed to kind of having that wider handle to be able to fill up my actual hand a little better. And then, I mean, obviously this watermelon's tapered, and so it's a little bit easier to cut farther down. I feel like that cut is just a little bit easier with a longer knife. I think that we've done enough testing for me to say that the jury is in. I've been making chef's knives wrong. That's actually just a clickbaity thing to say. This is still a totally usable chef's knife, and it definitely has its place in a kitchen. I will say that the handle is, I think, probably too small. And I think that I'm going to transition to making this my everyday user knife. If I had one of these knives in my hand for 6-8 hours in a day, I would definitely want it to be this one. I think despite the fact that it weighs 3 ounces more than the other knife, which is 50% more, the little guy is 6 ounces, this guy is 9 ounces. I think that extra weight is absolutely worth it in the amount of effort that you have to put through pushing it through food. And I think that with some geometry changes, thinning out that edge a little bit, I think that it'll perform even better. I'll probably take it back to the disc sander and thin that edge out just a touch, keeping the convexity to it, but just removing a little bit of material right behind the edge, which will really allow for it to go through things even easier. So I think the weight combined with a thinner edge will be the absolute ticket, and definitely this is going to be the direction that I'm going to be taking my work from here on out. Again, I still think that this is a great knife. I still love it. I'll still use it all the time, but I think that I'll probably use this one even more. So a huge thank you to Luke at Owl Woodworks for just, in a kind way, saying like, hey man, I think you should try out some larger stuff, because you were right. I'm stoked to have this knife in my kitchen. 02 yellow cedar burl from the Pacific Coast,
very close to where I grew up. Nice integral bolster, a belt finish, which is very utilitarian, but you know what? Totally nice finish, especially considering the fact that this knife will be patinaed. No matter what, it'll get patinaed, and at that point, whether it's hand sanded, whether it's sandblasted, whether it's belt finished, it doesn't really make a difference because it all looks pretty much the same. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you stick around, subscribe to the channel, like, comment, let me know all the things that I did wrong on this knife. I'm sure you guys probably know better, so let me know down below. Thank you to our patrons for patronizing us. With that, I'll see you guys on the next one. That's good watermelon.
Yeah, maybe it's the best watermelon this year I've had.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So watery.
Wonder why they call it a watermelon.
Good melon flavor.
Yeah.